A lot of work that LSU has to put out there and take care of this week. Kelly was speaking he was speaking with the teleconference yesterday. Every Wednesday, the league hosts the head coach's SEC teleconference where all 14 teams come on and meet for a couple of minutes with the press and media from around the league. And LSU is usually the top spot on this one. They're usually the first one to go. So Kelly yesterday was speaking a little bit. Lloyd had an opportunity to cut some of this stuff up. And Lloyd, we'll just run down the list of his opening statement here. Yesterday when he hopped on, he was talking about a couple of things, and even a player. There's a soundbite down the line here that we'll listen to on, a curious guy on how he can help in Javian Taviano and where he fits in. And Brian Kelly was speaking about that a little later. But here he is, opening statement yesterday from the SEC teleconference.
Certainly, we're pleased with the performance this past weekend against, really good South Alabama team, well coached, very good offense, and again, a team that, if you don't prepare well and come in with the right mindset, certainly can make things difficult for you. So I was pleased with, just the overall understanding of how to go into this game and play it the right way. And I thought we played a complete game. There were a couple of lapses here and there, but all in all, we played with the right intensity, the right sense of urgency, had big plays on offense, some really good stops defensively. And then again, got the kind of performance for 4 quarters that we had not really gotten this entire season. So pleased with that. Now, we've gotten back to the practice field. We're not really taking this as a off week. We'll have a recovery bye week later in the year that we'll spend more time on recovery in that sense. This week is really still working on us in terms of execution, fundamentals, being technically sound. And so practice this week and really prepare our guys, and then give them the weekend off and get ready for 7 weeks of SEC play.
Kelly yesterday opening statement in the SEC teleconference talking about how they handle and manage the week ahead. He's also got a veteran quarterback, an experienced quarterback, somebody who has been on campus and been in the program for a while. Here he is talking about having that level of experience and what a kind of a super senior quarterback feels like.
Well, I think it all depends, really. I mean, this still comes down to the preparation level necessary to be the starting quarterback at, a Power 5 and, an elite program. You have to have a professionalism about you that, fights the normal trend of wanting to just be good. And so regardless if it's an extra year or not, they have to be wired to wanting to be elite. And Jaden wanted that. And as has been well documented and talked about, he was tireless in his desire to do that. And he's seeing that pay off for him now. The work that he put in here, certainly it showed itself in his last year as a Heisman Trophy winner, but it's paying off in the NFL as well, because he treated him like he was a pro when he was here. And I think that that's what that 5th year is about, is that, where are you in terms of wanting to be elite? And if that's your mindset, it's a great year. If it's not,
yesterday talking about the advantages of the quarterback and having some veteran guys there, and LSU, like we've talked about, and we've talked about it for a while now. I mean, that has been one of the storylines that has really kind of changed the direction of the program, is how offensive and quarterback savvy they've become at a spot where, they couldn't figure it out. NIL, speaking of can't figure it out, it has changed so much over the last couple of years, and Kelly was addressing that when speaking on the teleconference Wednesday.
I would say, now that we're in this field longer, I would probably characterize it as market awareness. I still think that there is um, probably a wider gap than there needs to be, because there's not as much when you're dealing with third party, the education process with the agents is difficult because not all agents are the same. They're not all certified. So the education of that process, in other words, look, this is not market value, comes into play. If everybody was a certified agent, then you're talking to a lot more of an educated group that understands what the market is. So we still run into some that think the market is X and it's really not. And those are the ones that are a little bit more difficult. But I would say, generally speaking, there's a little bit better awareness of what that market looks like.
Thank you.
Kelly, speaking on NIL yesterday when talking to the SEC media, here he is on talking about how they manage the bye week.
No, I mean, I think what you have to do is you can't be hamstrung by injuries. You have to be thinking about, what's the next step, right? I mean, we can't cancel practice because we got a couple of guys injured. We got to look at what the remedy is. And so, these days actually come in handy for us relative to, getting reps for guys that need to step up, that were key backups that are now maybe pressed into starting roles. So it's really quite the contrary. This is a great week when you look at it from that perspective, that it's allowing us to give the work necessary to get guys that have been in key backup roles, really first team reps.
And Coach, with you mentioned the SEC schedule ahead, having already played South Carolina. What do you think of the Ole Miss South Carolina matchup this weekend, Coach?
Well, I think it's the SEC, right? I mean, each and every week, this is a battle. I mean, you've got good players on both sides of the ball. I think South Carolina presents a veteran defense, and one that has played a lot of football together. I think they're going to be a challenge. But on the other hand, that is an elite offense. And Lane's got a week now to understand what are the things that we need to do better at. I think it's going to be an exciting matchup against two really good teams.
Brian Kelly yesterday talking about the bye week and getting some guys some meaningful reps, and also sitting back and watching some SEC football. And yes, that Ole Miss South Carolina game is going to be one of a couple that are going to be very attractive here on a weekend that does not feature LSU football. There will be some really good games for everybody out there to watch. The Texas A&M Missouri game really jumps off, and then of course I think everybody will be locked into that South Carolina Ole Miss game to see the atmosphere that provides in the game, and see how Ole Miss responds after last week's loss to Kentucky and stepping into a pretty dangerous setting at William Bryce Stadium. I mean, that place is doesn't matter if you kick off at 11 a.m. or 6:30 in the evening. They pack it, fill it, and they create a home field advantage that is real. That you gotta play through. I mean, you could see LSU kind of getting lost in the moment a couple of times of just that place kind of putting your head on a swivel, and it's kind of spinning for a couple of seconds, especially when you play young guys, or not necessarily young guys, but new guys in a setting where we've all not been in this environment together, right? Like Walter Nolan and Trey Amos have not played in an environment that in a blink of an eye we're gonna have 90,000 totally against us, rowdy, yelling, and we're kind of wobbly. What happens when you don't make the play? How do you kind of bounce back from that? And you've never been in that setting if you're Ole Miss. I mean, with all of these new names and all of these new faces and, the money that was spent in the offseason, it definitely looks good on paper. But now you step into an environment where, hey, you guys kind of got to gel together and figure this thing out. So it'd be interesting to see that game, that environment. South Carolina, a week rested off of a bye week. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss coming off of a tough loss at home to Kentucky. It's storylines everywhere in that game. Ole Miss playing for their life. I mean, they lose on Saturday, it's over. I mean, they got, I would say, a long shot of making the playoff. And you spend all that money, you bring back a veteran quarterback, you bring back the talent that they have on that roster, there's an expectation of making the 12-team playoff. I mean, anything outside of that is really a huge bust. And if you lose on Saturday, that becomes nearly, I mean, they could, they still got Georgia on the schedule, but that becomes really, really hard to do if you lose to Kentucky, South Carolina, I would think.
And then you have, like you said, LSU and Georgia on the schedule. I don't know what it means for LSU if that's the way it plays out. Then you drop one to Ole Miss at home. I find it hard-pressed to see Ole Miss losing 3 in a row. And I think that this is a massive opportunity for them. After you got kind of punched in the face, you're like, okay, now we know we're not as physical as we thought we were. South Carolina's going to play that same brand of football, but this is another tough spot. Their first true road test of the season. They went to Wake Forest, but I don't think Wake Forest was pumping out Sandstorm and 80,000 people. I think it was a 40-6 football game that probably felt like practice. This is a real legitimate first time on the road SEC. And like you said, I don't think it would have been very easy for Jackson Dart to test the NFL waters. It would have been even easier for Trey Harris to test the NFL waters. You're probably looking back.
No doubt.
That wasn't cheap. That wasn't like, bet you really want to come win one for the Gipper.
Last week at this time, Jackson Dart was the leading Heisman candidate.
Now he's gone.
I mean, now in a weekend, he's vanished.
But he's still that caliber of player, certainly in college.
Sure. You would think. Big spot.
And you get Sellers is back off injury. Obviously, South Carolina got right with the bye week. That's what I think is the most interesting. Trey Harris and Ole Miss have to get up off the mat.
Yeah.
And you have South Carolina who's just kind of been waiting in the wings. And we were talking about this before the show, as South Carolina is foaming at the mouth to prove that they kind of belong at the table a little bit, especially the fan base once a marquee win after LSU's, what it seemed like they were going to get against LSU was snatched away from them. And now it's, okay, we beat Kentucky. We had a chance to beat – they could be undefeated. They had a chance to beat LSU, didn't do it, and now you have another opportunity for a marquee game at your place to kind of make a statement as to who you are with the Beamer era. And if you fall flat again, you pack it up.
Kimberly points out a good fact that kind of slips through the cracks in the storylines of this game. Juice Wells is a South Carolina transfer.
Yeah.
I mean, they are gonna be on tilt Saturday.
Juice is gonna have a
rough
long go.
Day.
It'd be a long one. I mean, you could see,
or your draft stock is gonna soar. I mean, this is a huge spot. This is a great game. It's a great setup. I mean, Lane loses on Saturday. He'll be in Gainesville by Wednesday.
What?
LSU be coaching against Chris Kiffin.
Juice Kiffin.
His brother be stepping in as the interim head coach if they lose Saturday. I mean, Lane will say, get me the hell out of here.
And I would be interested to see how that works out, if that is the case, where does Florida even continue to keep calling, because this is just what Lane Kiffin does. That's the narrative he's facing, is Lane Kiffin, you always have these offenses, and then you get to the big part of your schedule where it's a huge game and you fall flat and your team's soft. And if you're Florida, we know what we get.
Yeah.
Just another Lane Kiffin.
Right.
8-9 wins, maybe 10, but you're never actually there. And
big off season.
Right. And for Ole Miss, I mean, they've won 10 games back-to-back seasons. It felt like this was their shot. And it's not over by any means, but I feel like that's the pressure that is on Ole Miss this season, is you got to set this whole thing up to win it this year, and you'd have been satiated for the next 10 years.
Oh.
You'd have had so much time.
It would recruit itself
right
after this. I mean, if you prove with this team what the expectation is to go into the playoff, compete, be a Final Four team possibly, maybe even play for it, I mean, he could write his roster for the next 5 to 6 years. I mean, he could, recruit it. But now if he goes into
the portal,
Willie B, and gets beat 2 weekends in a row by Stoops and Beamer.
right?
I mean, that math doesn't math, Lane.
No, and
that's not supposed to happen.
All that said, with all of this kind of setting up for what it feels like would be an upset, certainly if they had beat Kentucky, Ole Miss, I feel like this game would probably be even more ripe for an upset. But I think the loss actually helps Ole Miss in this situation.
You would think.
Because this is not only do you have to win it, but it feels like a little bit of a, I don't want to say better matchup, but it's not the old head and Stoops who knew exactly, he has his game plan. South Carolina, it feels like can get
they
taken
held the
out
ball
of.
for 38
how y'all like my
minutes.
new offense?
Right. It was great though.
It's what you have to do.
I mean, it was a fantastic game plan.
Because when you looking ahead to LSU's game plan, you saw what they did last year. It was, you want to get in a track meet?
Yeah.
Who's the fastest kid in
no,
town?
you don't.
No, you don't.
You do not want to do that. Remember our friends over at Katie's Restaurant. You can find